Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another breakdown. Today we're going to be covering the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 7, the season finale. Now, I'd like to talk about the Book of Boba Fett and what I thought about it. However, I'm just going to get to the breakdown right away, and then either at the very end of this episode or in another video, I'll give you my full thoughts on the entire show as a whole. Now, that being said, let me just say this. The episode could have ended super easily by Boba just summoning his Slave One ship from his gauntlet, and once it arrived, he hops in and just destroys all forces opposing him. I feel like he literally could have won everything in a couple of minutes, and I'm not sure why he didn't utilize his ship. It could have just flown to him, because he has that feature. We've seen what ship blasters can do to shields, like in the Phantom Menace when Anakin blasted the droidekas in his Royal N1 Naboo starship. So I feel like he could have done something like that here, or at least use the ship to help him against the Pikes. Anyways, let's start with the breakdown. We got a few things to cover here, and then we can continue on with my thoughts about it. So we left the last episode with Grogu making the massive decision between the chainmail armor, the Beskar armor, and Yoda's lightsaber. We start off the season finale of Book of Boba Fett with Boba, Fennec, Mando, and the modders at the aftermath of the blown-up lounge of Garsa fwhip. Mando tells Boba that Cobb is coming, and of course we know that Cobb Vanth has been killed, or as we later found out in the post-credit scene, knocked out. That was him in the back of the tank, if you didn't know. Mando tells Boba that Cobb is coming, and Boba wants to head back to his palace as he has a better vantage point there, from the roofs and the lookouts. The modder tells him to stay in Mos Espa and protect the people, so he does. Now, I felt this was a little bit weird that he's listening to the modders and other people so much. I'm not a fan of Boba really listening to other people so much and not just doing what he wants and what he feels is best. That being said, it did make sense to protect the people of the town, so I see why he stayed. Cad Bane walks to the headquarters of the Pike leader, where the mayor of Mos Espa is also there, along with the leaders of the territories of the city, who had said they would be neutral in the war against Boba, and of course they weren't. We see the mayor seem a little firm with not wanting his town to be fully run by the Pikes, and tells them not to be so blaster happy blowing things up. I liked seeing this. I feel like the mayor needs to be a little bit more protective of his town now that the Pikes are coming in and buying him. And even so, he still was allowing everything to happen as it did, but he will meet his timely demise soon enough. Cad assures the Pike leader that he'll get Boba out. And I gotta say, every scene with Cad Bane is just very epic. I love seeing this character. He is super badass. Now, Luke's X-Wing lands down, and in the watch party I thought this was amazing. Luke will be in the scene. He's escorting Grogu to Tatooine, but in fact, he's not actually there. He sent R2 to taxi him there. I felt this was really weird. It just wasn't Luke. It felt a little careless on Luke's part. It's like Luke doesn't care that much in a sense, so he just sends Grogu off without protection. That's kind of an odd move, especially considering he would have been Luke's first student. I mean, what if someone apprehended the X-Wing? What if someone saw Grogu in there? What if... Who knows? There's so many different things that could have happened. I think it would have been cooler if Luke went with him and showed up during the battle, taking out droids until he gets slammed into a wall by maybe an evil Force user, perhaps a Dark Jedi, much like Joruus C'baoth, or Darth Talon, or maybe even Mara Jade, who appears with Crimson Dawn. I feel this episode needed more than just the man versus man Pikes. It had a ton of cool flashy scenes, but the exposition was just kind of dragged on. Cad Bane dies in a second, and the Pikes who eventually get taken out just are kind of gone. They just leave. The Rancor was epic beyond measure. That was a super cool scene, but again, it's Flash. It needed more muscle than just the Pikes, I think. We needed a bigger antagonist. Thrawn, a Dark Jedi, Crimson Dawn, Black Sun. You know, Black Sun hates the Pikes. Maybe they join in. Who knows? Cad Bane pays Boba a visit, and we get a bit of a standoff as they have some banter back and forth. He reveals, just like the Pike leader did, that it was the Pikes themselves who took out the Tuskens, and blamed it on the Speeder Gang. Boba is about to blast him when Fennec talks in his ear and tells him that he's being too emotional and to wait for a better moment, when so many shooters didn't have the high ground. Boba finally complies and realizes that he's being emotional, which clouds his judgment. And this is kind of a Jedi thing, but it's also a warrior thing. I mean, the one who's most calm will have a better chance at winning a fight. Cad tells him that he's going soft in his old age, and Boba tells him, "We all do." I didn't like that line very much. It just seems like everyone who gets old now in Star Wars is just soft, which can be mistaken with being more mature and having seen more in life and picking their battles now, but more so just letting things roll over them when enough is enough. It just kind of seems a little bit out of character in a sense, especially since we haven't seen a lot of these characters in, decades. And also, of course, don't go gentle into that good night. Cad is older than everyone and he never went soft, but I guess, that's where his character development kind of ends. I guess that's just what makes him the villain. Then again, in order to have full character development, you don't have to change the character's actual character. One of the cool things about Boba that I really liked was that he didn't talk much, was that he was stoic, was that he was just more mysterious, and he kind of just did what he wanted. He was feared, much like Jango, much like Cad Bane. Now, Boba could have ended this whole thing very easily, as I said, by getting in his Slave One ship and mowing down the Pikes like he did the Nikta gang from the beginning, but he didn't, and it dragged out so much. Maybe it was a nod to Luke in The Last Jedi, I'm not really sure, maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but you can let me know. Mando and Boba are ambushed by dozens of Pikes, and they decide to protect the people of Mos Espa by going out there and fighting to the death. This is the way. Now when Mando says that, Boba says, "Do you believe that bantha fodder?" And he's mainly talking about the way of the warrior, the way of honor, by abiding to his word, the way of the Mandalorian. Now this shows the difference between the Mandalorian creeds. Now Boba isn't your typical Mandalorian. He's Jango's clone and he was raised by him on Kamino. Now in Legends, Jango did become the ruler of Mandalorian people at one point, but that of course is Legends. He uses the distraction that the Major Domo makes with the fake surrender offer, and we get such an epic team up of Mando and Boba fighting side by side, back to back, like Anakin and Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars. It was one of my favorite parts of the episode, and it definitely was a big highlight. It also made me wonder why it took so long to see Boba use his jetpack in battle and be epic like he was in The Mandalorian Season 2. I think he could have done this maneuver against the assassins in the very first episode of the season. Heck, he even could have grabbed Fennec and flown to a rooftop and blasted everyone off. All that said, the scene was really beautiful. It was the climax of the show, I think, and besides Luke and Ahsoka, of course, and the Order 66 Grogu scene. When they were getting outnumbered and the Beskar was taking all the hits of the Pikes, the people of Freetown showed up and helped save the day. The Modders show up and Chrysanthemum arrives as well and is badly injured. However, his cybernetics are definitely helping sustain his movements. And I'll make a video on that for you after this one about Chrysanthemum's cybernetics, because they're pretty interesting. Boba Fett goes in there and helps him to safety behind the barricade of the floating armored speeder barge from Freetown. Din and Boba team up to fight against the Scorpionic Annihilator droids. And this was a really cool scene. The darksaber being used for a second wasn't effective at all, as Din says his kinetic weapons have too much velocity and his energy weapons can't get through, meaning blasters and lightsabers just won't work. However, I do believe if the energy is powerful enough, maybe like a seismic charge, or perhaps maybe even the blasts of the Slave One's rockets could have gotten through, and maybe those could have been as powerful as the Rancor crushing it or, tossing it aside. But perhaps not, maybe these energy shields are now upgraded from the Galactic Republic. Boba blasts off to get his Rancor, and Din is left to protect the town against the droids. Now these droids are from Legends, and they're pretty damn cool. These are the Scorpionic Annihilator droid. Now these guys are kind of like droidekas, just souped up. I believe I have seen them in the Art of the Revenge of the Sith, however I'll have to find that page for you guys and I can mention them in another video, but they're pretty sweet. Chrysanthemum tries to reach through the energy shield and it's working, however even with all of his strength and might, it's not fully enough as the droid realizes and kicks him away. Din has a hard time with the Scorpionic droids, but eventually comes across Pelimoto, who is with Grogu. The two are reunited once again finally, and it's an emotional moment. Now I feel that this kind of undermines Luke's scene in The Mandalorian Season 2 finale, where he takes Grogu. I feel like he was supposed to train him, but that's kind of all for naught now, because he just doesn't really train much with him. Boba arrives with his giant Rancor and he's riding it. The Rancor is like King Kong and hops around from building to building, taking out the droids. This is a pretty sick scene. He has a rough time with them and gets quite hit. However, he eventually pushes through their field, breaking it down and rips it apart. And Mando helps with the first one as well, getting inside of its weakened shield, dismantling most of it with the darksaber until he's thrown off and Grogu uses the Force like he did against the Mudhorn in The Mandalorian Season 1. Grogu pulls a kneecap from the droid as it falls and gives Mando a moment to get to safety until the Rancor recovers and rips it in half. The modders help in the fight, along with Chrysanthemum and the people of Freetown, but in the end, Boba and his Rancor take out all of the Scorpionic Annihilator droids. Peli and the Majordomo are probably going to end up dating, and Boba's Rancor eats a pike and crushes the others until he gets thrown off when Cad Bane uses his flamethrower on him. The Rancor leaves, probably because he's untrained and doesn't like fire, but honestly I just feel like the Rancor could have thrown something at Bane and that would have been the end of it. But of course we can't have that kind of an ending for Cad. Bane and Boba face off, and this is the moment we've all been waiting for since that unreleased episode of the Clone Wars that ended in a stalemate with Boba's helmet dented and Bane's head needing that metal plate. I mean, both were on the ground unconscious. However, that scene was never published, but I guess it did happen, seeing as how Boba's helmet is dented and Bane does have that metal plate. Bane doesn't know what Boba's angle is, thinking it's weird of him to be so concerned with ruling Tatooine when he's a cold-blooded bounty hunter, so even he thinks it's weird and is confused. They fight and it's quite lackluster for me. I was expecting something more grandiose from Bane. He is faster than Boba, of course, granted, but then again he's using a lighter single-handed pistol, whereas Boba has a heavy EE3 carbine rifle with 2 hands. That being said, Cad Bane is the fastest hand in the galaxy, so it makes sense. Boba gets shot down and Cad tells him that he got too much of his father's blood in him, which is like a line that Luke used in The Last Jedi, saying that he has the mighty Skywalker bloodline flowing through his veins. I see a lot of nods towards The Last Jedi, like when Cad said you got soft with age. Maybe he's trying to explain Luke, but once again, I don't think that you need to get soft with age. I think you could maybe just be a little more experienced and wise. However, you can still be as firm and as powerful as you were, maybe even more so. Maybe even you're fed up with things and you're much more short-tempered. As Cad walks up to Boba to blast him, he tells Boba that this is his final lesson. So what he means by this is because Cad Bane actually mentored Boba, and he did this because Jango mentored him. So in a way, he kind of helped look after and raise Boba a little bit when he was a boy. As he rips Boba's helmet off, he stands up to end him when he gets hit off of his feet with Boba's gaffy stick from the Tusken Raiders. This is pretty poetic, it's pretty beautiful. It shows that Boba is completely cutting himself off from the ties of his father, of his bounty hunter ways, of his past, and now as Boba Fett, incorporating the ways of the Tuskens into what he knows, more of who he is. And I think this show is all about kind of disassociating yourself from where you're from, or maybe what you're supposed to be like. Boba is becoming someone else. You know, he's not the bounty hunter that he always was. Grogu isn't going to be a Jedi or Force user like he was born into. He wants to be with the Mandalorian. And we kind of just see this theme play out through the whole show, that they're just choosing their own paths. Anyways, Bane tries to flame Boba even on the ground, and Boba just deflects it and stabs him through the chest-stomach area. And it sounds like he's decompressing as he dies, exhaling. I'm kind of sad. I feel like Cad just came into the show just to die. There's so much more that he could have been part of from the start, which would have made their duel more climactic as well. That being said, I don't think he's fully dead, and let me explain. As he's left for dead on the sands of Tatooine, we hear a beeping noise. Now, many might think that this could be a detonator that's going to go off, but I think it's the beeping of a signal being sent to someone telling them that he's dead, which brings in the bigger guns like Crimson Dawn, or it calls for his ship and droid to come and retrieve him so that he can be put in bacta or taken to be healed. Cad obviously has some upgrades, and I feel his metal plate on his head shows that he can't die very easily, even when shot to the dome by Boba. So I don't think he's really dead, at least I hope. He's way too cool of a character to just kill off like that, especially if you best Boba so easily. The Rancor has a King Kong moment, tries to eat Mando but can't because of the Beskar, and Grogu walks up to it to use beast control much like Anakin did on the Reek in the Geonosis Arena in Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, which funny enough is where Boba Fett's father Jango Fett dies at the hands of Mace Windu. We saw a flashback of that scene at the very beginning of the season where little Boba holds Jango's helmet. Grogu puts the Rancor to sleep. Now, beast control isn't a power everyone had, just like psychometry isn't a power everyone had either, which Quinlan Vos and Cal Kestis possessed. If you didn't know, psychometry is the power of seeing where an object has been and who has had it in their hands when you touch an object. The Pike leader plans to leave, and the leaders of the territories fight with him that he can't just leave like that. He reckons that Tatooine is too dangerous to move his spice, especially with Boba's Rancor now in the mix. Fennec, being the expert assassin she is, takes out everyone in the room. It was a cool scene, I liked it, I thought it fit. Boba walks through his town and the people respect him. They see him as their new leader, and he's officially earned their respect, which is what he intended to do in the first episode of the season, to rule with respect as he bows to his people. So he did set out to do what he wanted to do. He says his bacta is being used when Fennec asks, and we know Cobb Vanth is in there as we saw in the end credit scene. He throws Black Chrysanthemum a melon, and the final line is a joke that the Wookiee gets a melon and they don't. So I guess these guys are going to be just chilling on Tatooine maybe, and they're going to be ruling with Boba or hanging out with Boba, and he's going to be using them as his muscle and friends. The end credit scene is Cobb Vanth getting healed in the bacta tank, and the modder guy is there about to mod him up, so the next time we see Cobb, we'll see he's probably a cyborg or he's enhanced in some way. For me, I was waiting for the end credit scene and I thought this was super underwhelming. I thought it was just very lame, like who cares in my opinion? I was like, whatever. I was hoping we would see Luke Skywalker meditating, and then behind him flies in the Millennium Falcon. It lands, young Han Solo, deep-faked Han Solo, Harrison Ford walks out and says, "Hey kid, how's it going?" And then, then we see little Ben Solo walk out behind his dad. And Luke looks at him, doesn't say a word, and we know what happens next. So that could have been pretty cool, I think. But anyways, we got what we got. Overall, look, I love the Boba Fett, but this show was all over the place. It felt like it was just a cluster of Star Wars. And if that's the case, then hey, cool. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. It had Ahsoka, it had Luke, it had Mando, it had the darksaber, it had Rancors, Boba, and so much more. But as for a Boba Fett show, I give it below a 5. It just made Boba softer. He still could be the good guy without being so damn soft about things. How I would have had the show go is that he's traveling from planet to planet in the galaxy, picking some of the most scum-ridden planets out there, and I would have kept the Hutts as probably the main antagonist of the show. He would have gone through these different crime planets and he would have recruited members to fight an already establishing crime syndicate, perhaps either the Hutts, or maybe the Hutts hired him, or maybe he is going against Crimson Dawn or Black Sun. And as I said, we could still get Luke and Grogu scenes or those episodes. However, we get Grogu choosing to be with Din like we got here. However, when he arrives with Luke midst the battle, and Luke takes out the opposition with some ease until he's slammed into a wall either by a Dark Jedi, or Mara Jade or some other Dark Jedi, or like Darth Talon. If not, then all is the same, and the end credit scene could have been, as I said, Luke meditating on the planet. We could have seen Ben Solo and maybe him taking his first student in. I feel like it would have been beautiful to see Luke and Han together for once. I love the actors, Tem Morrison and Ming Na, and everyone else did a fantastic job on the show. The first 2 episodes were beautiful in my opinion. However, this show itself was just scattered. It couldn't decide on who it was really about. Boba, Din, Grogu, Luke, Ahsoka. It was fun as a Star Wars show, don't get me wrong, but not as a Boba show. I wanted more Boba, and I wanted him to be more aggressive, not so passive and soft. His arc with the Tuskens was my favorite. Beyond that, the show dragged on the exposition far too much, and the final ending was just lackluster, I think. It felt very dragged out, and all just ended with a shootout in the town when it all could have been avoided by the Slave One blasting everyone to pieces. I hope we get a continuation of Boba's character. I love Boba Fett, and I still do. However, my sights are now set on Kenobi, and I can't wait to see that with all of you. Thanks so much for joining the watch parties. Thanks so much for watching the breakdowns and the videos supporting the show. I was super hyped. I had so many different theories, and I know a lot of other content creators out there did too, and Star Wars fans in general. However, it seems like none of them really came true. I'll see you guys in the next episode on Star Wars Theory. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.